Hello and welcome to Kashmatics. In this lesson, I'll be going through inverse proportion. If you haven't already seen my video on direct proportion, please go and watch that first because it'll form the foundations of what I'm going to do today. Anyway, grab yourself a pen and some paper and let's get started. First of all, let's describe what inverse proportion is. If y is inversely proportional to x, then as x increases, y will decrease at the same rate. So let's say x is multiplied by 2, that means y will get halved. If x is multiplied by 10, then y gets divided by 10. Okay, and the same goes the other way around. If x is divided by 10, then y will be multiplied by 10. Now sometimes inverse proportion can be described slightly differently. Sometimes people say y is directly proportional to 1 over x, but usually they'll say y is inversely proportional to x. Before I do an example, I just want to have a look at some notation and some algebraic techniques. So if y is inversely proportional to x is written as y with this proportional symbol and 1 over x. So the 1 over x is important. Now if I want to turn that into an equation, I need to introduce what's called a constant of proportionality. So this becomes y equals k over x. Now if it's inversely proportional to x squared, it'll be k over x squared. And if it's inversely proportional to the square root of x, it'll be k over the square root of x. So bear that in mind. Algebraic techniques, you need to be able to rearrange these formulas to make x a subject. So there's an extra step compared to direct proportion. If I want to make x a subject, so in this example over here, I need to multiply by x to move the x to the other side and then divide by y. Now a very similar technique is applied with x squared as well, but the only thing you need to remember is at the end, you need to do the square root to get what x is, okay? Because at this stage here, you'll have x squared, so you need to do the square root of your answer at that stage to get what x is. And similarly, over here, when you get to the end, so just before the end, sorry, you'll have the square root of x. So to work out what x is, you need to square the right-hand side, okay? So just bear that in mind. So pause the video and make some notes on that if you need to, because understanding this part of it is crucial to understanding the rest of it. So let's look at this first example. It says given that y is inversely proportional to x, and when x equals 2, y equals 120. Calculate the value of y when x equals 48 and the value of x when y equals 8. Now the first thing I'm going to do is condense all this information into a table, and I want you to remember how I've done that because the questions I'm going to ask you to do will be given in a table rather than as a big question like this one. So let's just put all this information into the table. So when x equals 2, y equals 120. And I'm going to work out what y is when x equals 48. So put 48 there because we're going to work out this value. And work out what x is when y equals 8. So put 8 there because we're going to work out this value. Now let's just write this sentence here as an equation. Okay, so y is proportional to 1 over x is how we write y is inversely proportional to x. Now let's change this into an equation. Y equals k over x. So just like I showed you before. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put in these conditions. Okay, so replace the y with 120 and that equals k divided by 2. So multiplying through by 2 gives me 240 is equal to k. Now at this stage here, I'm going to replace the k to turn this into a proper equation. So y is equal to 240 over x. Okay, so this is a really important stage to reach because now we've got the exact relationship between y and x. So what we can do now is fill in the numbers in the table. So let's just draw ourselves a line there to separate things. So I'm going to work out what y is when x equals 48. So when x equals 48, y equals 240 divided by 48, which equals 5. Okay, so I can put 5 here. So that's that part done. And then I need to rearrange this. Okay, remember I need to rearrange this just like I showed you. So y is equal to 240 over x. So x times y equals 240, which means x is equal to 240 divided by y. Okay, so when y equals 8, x would equal 240 divided by 8. Now 24 divided by 8 is 3, so 240 divided by 8 would be 30. Okay, so this would be 30. So pause the video and make some notes and then I'll give you some questions to try. Right, so here's 4 questions for you to try. Remember, y is inversely proportional to x. Pause the video and I'll put up the answers shortly. So the answers are coming up in 3, 2, 1, and there you go. Okay, so those are the missing numbers and the relationships between y and x. Now in this example, it says y is inversely proportional to x squared. And when x equals 2, y equals 675. And we're going to work what y is when x equals 3 and what x is when y equals 108. So the first thing we're going to do is just fill in the table like we did before. So when x equals 2, y equals 675. And we're going to work out what y is when x equals 3 and what x is when y equals 108. So that's that information condensed into that table. So let's just start with the algebra. So y is inversely proportional to x squared. That's how we write that, which means y is equal to k over x squared. And now we're going to put in these two numbers. So 675 is equal to k divided by 2 squared. Okay, so 675 is equal to k over 4. And if I multiply it by 4, I'll work out what k is. And if I do that, I get 2,700 is equal to k. So plugging this back into this over here, I'll get y is equal to 2,700 divided by x squared. So that's my relationship between y and x. And now we can fill in the numbers in the table. So when x equals 3, y is equal to 2,700 divided by 3 squared, which is going to be 2,700 divided by 9, which is 300. Okay. Now before we work out what x is when y equals 108, we need to rearrange this equation. So we've got y equals 2,700 divided by x squared. Multiplying both sides by x squared, I get x squared y equals 2,700. Now let's divide through by y, and I'll get x squared equals 2,700 divided by y. So let's plug in our value of y. So it's 2,700 divided by 108. Okay, because y equals 108, and that gives me 25. So that's what x squared is. So x is going to equal the square root of 25, which is 5, and that's what goes there. So pause the video if you need to, make some notes, and then we'll do some questions. So here's some questions for you to try. Pause the video and I'll give you the answers shortly. And the answers are coming up in 3, 2, 1, and there you go. Okay, so those are your missing values and the relationships between y and x. And the final example for me is when y is inversely proportional to the square root of x. Okay, so and this can be quite tricky. So just pay attention and watch what I'm doing. So let's just fill in the table as before. So when x equals 4, y equals 12, and we're going to work out what y is when x equals 9 and what x is when y equals 6. Okay, so that's the table completed. Let's write down the relationship. So y is inversely proportional to the square root of x is written like that. So that means y is equal to k divided by the square root of x. And we're going to put in our two values of x and y. So when y equals 12, so I've got 12 equals k divided by the square root of 4. So that means 12 is equal to k divided by 2. And if I multiply by 2, I'll get 24 equals k. And if I plug that into here, I get y is equal to 24 divided by the square root of x. So let's fill in the table now. So when x equals 9, y will equal 24 divided by the square root of 9, which is 24 divided by 3, which is 8. So 8 goes here. And let's rearrange this now. So y is equal to 24 over the square root of x. That means the square root of x times by y equals 24, which means the square root of x equals, now I have to divide by y here, so 24 divided by y. And my value of y that I've got is 6. So 24 divided by 6 is 4. But remember, that is the square root of x. So if the square root of x is 4, then x would equal 4 squared, which is 16. Okay, so that's my missing value there. Make some notes if you need to. Take your time with this one because it is a little bit tricky, and then we'll go on to some questions. And there's 4 questions for you to try. So as always, pause the video and I'll go through the answers shortly. and the answers are going to appear in 3, 2, 1, and there you go. All right, so those are the answers and the relationships. And that's it for inverse proportion. Thank you for watching and listening, and I hope you'll be back for another tutorial. Goodbye for now.